Thank you both for coming in. Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for state representative from the 49th District, Position 1, Kaitlyn Beck and Sharon Wylie. Thank you both for coming in. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor. And just so you know, we are videotaping this. We'll post it on our website unedited for the benefit of our readers. And with that, we'll get started. Let's begin with some... What's that? Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry about the interruption there. We'll start with some introductions. Take 1 to 2 minutes. Give us a little bit of background about yourself and explain why you're running for this position, and then we'll move on to some specific policy questions. So we'll start with Kaitlyn.
So, Kaitlyn Beck. A little bit about me. I moved to the Pacific Northwest the day after I graduated high school. I've always known this was my home. I've been looking at apartments and homes in Portland since I was in 6th grade. I professionally have worked with Planned Parenthood Action Fund, the Nature Conservancy. I've been the secretary for the 49th Legislative District Democrats. And the reason I'm running is because we need a truly progressive voice in the legislature. Somebody who's very personally experienced and very deeply understands the issues that the 49th District is facing. I have personally lived through the housing crisis, understanding just how hard it is to find a home. I have experienced short-term homelessness, so I understand the fear that comes with that. I know how hard it is just to be able to step into the education scene and go back to school. I have lived through all of these issues that we're currently facing here. So I understand the need and the concern that our local families are going through. Ultimately, because of that experience, I would definitely be the better option in terms of bringing a more diverse voice to the legislature on how to solve these issues. I would also be the youngest and first transgender person elected to the legislature, so I would bring a diverse voice to handling issues that are affecting young people and the LGBT community in order to, again, provide that diverse voice with very personal experience.
Great, thank you. Sharon?
Well, I had the good fortune to be appointed to fill a vacancy in 2011, and I had good experience for that, and that's why I was appointed. For 9 years, I represented Clark County's diverse interests that the county commissioners had control over in the legislature, and during that time I helped get additional dollars for mental health treatment. I worked with the Council for the Homeless, and then when I left working for the county, I went back on that board. I'd been on that board before that job. I continued it, and I continued afterwards. Housing and homelessness is a very, very high priority in my family, and my husband and I both do a lot of volunteer work in that area. I helped get the funding for the Center for Community Health and improving the 134th interchange. And before many, many years ago, I served 2 terms in the Oregon legislature. I've concentrated on tax policy and consumer protection issues and saving money so that we have more money available for the things that are high priorities. My first session there, I saved $1 million a year by carrying the bill that reformed the state's procurement system. I've worked with a lot of colleagues across the aisle for transportation funding and for protection from cyberbullying, sex trafficking, getting funding for the rape kits and making sure that they're processed. So I have the ability to address a variety of issues, and some of the things that we're going to be facing are trying to get our tax policy right. I serve on the Finance Committee, and we're going to have to make some compromises. We're going to have to find new revenue that doesn't inhibit the growth of our businesses or have disparate impacts. My underlying values are that we don't move in a continuously regressive tax system, so I'm going to be looking at both economic development impacts and how regressive any increases are, because we have an aging population that is we're going to need to pay attention, and we have We have a growing problem of homelessness. My work with the Housing Authority and the Council for the Homeless gives me a very good understanding of just how complex that issue is. And I have a lot of ideas for what we can do moving forward that will address some of the different complexities of that.
Great, and let's follow up on that. You say we're going to need new revenue. That's code for new taxes. What
Right.
would you propose?
There's several things. One of the things that that is going to be a likely part of the mix is eliminating some of the tax preferences. When I jumped into this in 2011, I became part of what was then called the Freshman 13, and we had figured out that the amount of money that we were giving away to the three big out-of-state banks that participated in bringing on the recession, Bank of America, Chase, and Wells Fargo, they were escaping a tiny, what to them was a tiny tax on mortgage interest profits. And the amount we were giving away to just those big three was enough money to fund all-day kindergarten for the entire state. And we proposed that against some conservative advice from our own party, and it didn't pass. But the next year, when we were squeezed again, the Republicans came forward and said, let's talk about that again. And so we didn't get it all back, but we made progress. In each session, we've made more progress. And frankly, some of those tax preferences, as much as I dislike them, have a good purpose. And the good purpose is that they ameliorate the things that are wrong with our current tax system and how it doesn't fit today's world at all. It doesn't help our small businesses, doesn't help innovation, and it certainly doesn't help people in poverty. And so every time we do one of those or leave it there, we are reducing the momentum to come up with some better changes. And so I think that, peeling some of those back and having clawback provisions for where we have to give them away, bringing more of those large beneficiary businesses to the table, maybe under some threat that their tax breaks may be at issue unless they help us reform the system, is going to be an ongoing discussion, and we'll make progress, but we won't get there by that alone. People are talking about a capital gains tax, and the proposal that's on the table is linked to the idea of making it more of a sales tax. That means that people that have so much wealth that they're living solely on dividends, don't have to sell anything, aren't subject to that. And so that's somewhat volatile.
Would you support that?
We're going to have a bigger conversation to make it broader than what's proposed. What's proposed is going to be a battle, and frankly, I think we have to support what we can get bipartisan support for, and what people are willing to defend, and that's a balancing act. I've been doing this for a long time, and without a clear majority and a clear vision for what we should do, and the community support so that it doesn't get overturned by a vote of the people, we have to have a lot of conversations. So we're not going to get all the way where we should be, but I think we can make some real progress because of the pressure of McCleary. We have to do that, and nobody I know of either party really wants to throw other people under the bus in order to get there just by cuts. I don't think that's going to happen. We can't do that. So we're going to have to look at a combination of things. We're going to have to look at some new revenue. The property tax is the focus. The inequalities of the property tax are the focus of what's left of the McCleary decision that we haven't made progress on, and we're going to have to address that. We'll have to phase it in because it has disparate impacts to some school districts.
Let's
sure.
Kaitlyn, how would you approach the state's tax system?
So it's going to be a big focus on large corporations. We have to cut corporate tax loopholes before we ask other people to pay more. We need to find a way to move away from the regressive sales tax that we have. Sales tax, unfortunately, poor people are going to be paying more of their income. So somebody that makes $30,000 a year spends $30,000 a year. is paying 8% in their sales tax. Somebody that makes $200,000 a year but only pays $50,000 in order to purchase products is only paying 2% of their income to sales tax. So we need to explore options that we have to reform our sales tax system to make it equitable for lower income people across the state, and again, ending the corporate loopholes. So
would you support an income tax?
I support having the conversation to explore different options. I would want to make sure that if an income tax was on the table, that a majority of Washingtonians would be in support of that, and it would be equitable and fair to everybody across the state.
Do you think the corporate loophole, Phil, what do you think that's going to generate?
Corporate loopholes, that is billions of dollars that our state is letting go to large corporations that are paying their workers low-income wages, not as good benefits as some more socially responsible companies. And exploring that as an option, we're going to be able to find funding to resolve issues like McCleary, or and after exploring that, we can then again take a look at the disparities that we have in our state our state property tax.
And let me ask this tax question a slightly different way. I don't ask it to Bills, but I'll start with Taylor. So let's take off the table for a second how we bring money into the state. There are lots of ways, lots of different tax proposals, exemptions, loopholes. If you take the ways in which you bring the money into the state, right now, do you think state government is generating enough money, or does state government have to generate more money in order to serve the people of the state? And if more, how much more does the state need? If you follow that.
Yes.
Okay.
So we are looking at a budget shortfall coming into the next few years here. That was projection that we are all looking at. So the state does need to raise more in order to meet current spending needs that was passed in the last legislative session. With that, I would say the state does need to look at increasing revenue a little bit in order to meet our current spending plans. If we need to increase funding in order to meet things like education, then we absolutely do need to be raising more money for the purpose of being able to meet our constitutional obligations to fully fund education. Outside of that, exploring other options for affordable housing measures to help lower income families and pulling homeless people off the streets. So we absolutely do need to be raising more money because, again, we don't have enough right now for what we passed last session. And we have so many more problems that we have to explore still. In order to solve them, we have to raise revenue.
And do you think there's any meaningful fat in the government as it now exists? In other words, would you be able to generate some cost savings if you took a hard look at what we are presently spending money on? And if you say yes, there is some meaningful fat in there, do you have any idea how much that might be?
So I'm not going to say any program should be cut, because cutting from programs ultimately affects lower income and working families more, as our state government is structured a way to help those people. So I'm not going to say we need to make cuts. There's always places that we can take a look at to explore efficiencies, like Sharon did. She saved the state $1 million procurement. There are other options that we have in order to create efficiencies without creating cuts. So if we can take a look at those and make sure that we're spending money the right way, or reform ways that we are spending money in order to save money in the long run, I'm always willing to take a look at that option. But cuts are not something I want on the table in the beginning.
Thank you. Sharon, I'm assuming you'll say that we need more money, but you could say it, not me. And is there anything out there, in wages, benefits, pensions, programs? Is there anything out there that we should be looking at to try to trim?
I think the effort to look at everything is an ongoing, there's a lot of people that get elected with the idea that they're going to find the fat. There's a lot of employees that are looking to offer up the fat, in order to make themselves look good and responsible, and most of them are. So that's an ongoing effort, and a lot of the best ideas come to us through employees. There isn't any one stream that's going to fix the problem all by itself that has even a prayer of being acceptable. We're going to need somewhere between $2.5 and $3.5 billion just for the state's portion of McCleary in order to offset the property tax situation. And we don't know what those good numbers are going to be until January, when the latest dive deep study on how that's being done in the schools, in the campuses of the schools, is going to be available. And we're going to have different philosophical views of what the role of government is coming together in January. I think that long term, we should be getting rid of the B&O tax and going with a corporate type of income tax. But that's a long-term effort, and it's why I'm not a short-termer on this, because it takes a long time to get there, and 2/3 of every long session is spent training the new people. We'll probably have 30% new people who are going to find out that what they campaigned on isn't practical, but that's in both parties, and that's part of the process. So there isn't one simple answer, and the $2.5 to $3.5 billion is just for schools. That doesn't take into account that we're going to be facing the same kind of court pressure on mental health, and we've got an aging population that's going to need more regular health care as well, and services in order to stay in their home, which is the most dignified and cost-effective way to do it, and without more people. Most of the unexpected, unplanned costs of government have to do with being understaffed in critical functions and being sued because you can't do the right thing because you don't have enough people, or being ripped off by corporations because we're not monitoring our contracts well enough when we contract out, things that maybe government used to do. But if government had not had technology, we would have 10 times as many people doing the bean counting alone that we have today, given the number of transactions there are. So technology offers continuous improvement, but it's complicated, and I think this is the time where we really have to dig down and have honest conversations with people.
Is government too big?
Is it too big? I don't even know how to answer that question.
Yes or no?
No.
Is government too big, Kate?
No.
We've been talking about financing, and you both brought up affordable housing. I'm just curious, this isn't a legislature thing, but what are your thoughts on Vancouver's Proposition 1? Is that the right approach to addressing affordable housing, Kaitlyn?
So Proposition 1 is going to be a good step in the right direction. It's shown a similar proposal up in Bellingham has helped their city increase affordable housing options better than expected. But it's not going to be the only solution. I've been campaigning on this since the beginning, and Governor Inslee recently stated his support in the last gubernatorial debate, where we need to amend the revised Code of Washington to allow for rent caps. I would propose a 5% rent cap statewide. That would be my personal goal, getting that passed in the legislature. If I can't get that passed statewide, at least giving local counties and municipalities the ability to pass a rent cap at their level in order to alleviate the issues currently being faced with people seeing their rent being raised 25 to 30%. Another step that we're going to have to take is ending no-cause eviction in Washington State. Ending no-cause eviction and increasing eviction notices from 20 days to 60 days at the statewide level.
And let me just follow that and make sure I understand you. In our capitalistic society, I think it generally is said that let the market forces decide prices. So would this 5% cap sort of go against what the typical capitalistic way of how this country works? Does that go against that?
Well, capitalism is a form of economy, but housing should not be something that we look at purely in a market sense. Housing is a basic human right. And if the market is getting to a point where that basic human right is being put at risk, and we're looking at mass evictions and people sleeping on the street with their children because they can't afford their rent or because a landlord decided they wanted to do some upgrades, that's not right. This is a person's stable, warm house where they are raising a family, where they are working from to get an education. This is something that shouldn't be held to market whim. This is something that we need to protect for everybody. So if it does go against our capitalistic society, so be it. But this is something we have to do in order to protect our working and lower class families.
Sharon, thoughts on Proposition 1? Is that the proper approach?
Proposition 1 has a very, very important piece, which is the securing of land piece. They aren't making any more land. We have urban growth boundaries for good reasons because of the cost of services. And so I'm in favor of Prop 1, but probably the more compelling battle, the voters will respond to that, and I hope they pass it because it's another tool, and communities have done very well with that, and it addresses a number of the underlying problems that we have to wrestle with if we're going to make an improvement in our low-income housing stock. But we have a document recording fee that for the last 10 years has provided local money to provide a variety of options, including bonding for a certain part of the housing, helping organizations like Share House, helping with mental health treatment. There's a whole bunch of things, and they're all community-based to community needs. That document recording fee could go away if we don't renew it. And probably take away some of the exemptions. Cities, for instance, on lien recording for utilities are exempt because one tiny little city didn't like it when it was first passed. So there's ways to make it more robust, but it's a proven method to address this, and it's at risk, and that would pull the rug out from under a lot of the organizations that are doing really good work and addressing all of the pieces. We do need to do some of the things that City of Vancouver was brave enough to do. The no-cause eviction, the no discrimination on type of income, and some of those other elements are really important, and they haven't passed, but they've come close, and they're gaining bipartisan support. So I think their time has come, and the urgency is really clear. The rent control, if you do it wrong, it'll cause a firestorm, and it could cause such a firestorm that we don't even get the document recording fee, which is keeping people alive right now. So we have to set some priorities. What's that?
The document recording fee, that's scheduled to sunset?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So it has to be renewed. It has to be renewed.
So are you opposed to a cap on rent?
I think I'm leaning towards a local option, and I'm looking towards limiting the number and the amount that can be done at one time, unless there are economic reasons in terms of significant repairs, things like that. I think that what we want is to partner with the landlord community, and it's I'm at odds with that community some of the time I agree with them. But that's not the only problem. What we have is 30 years of federal devolution in the area of housing, and a huge amount of, federal money has gone away that has supported low-income housing stock. And so those stocks of houses have been turned over to the private sector. Some of our public-private partnerships are expiring, and now those are going to market rate. So we have the housing crisis, and then we have 20 years of the landlord organizations lobbying for vouchers that they now don't have to take because we don't have the proper laws. and now we have a shortage. So between the resources we've given away at the federal and the state level, the housing crunch, and our changing demographics, we have a worse crisis than we had to have.
And maybe this dovetails into this, and I'll go to Kaitlyn first. So we are all aware that we have this housing issue, particularly for low-income people and being able to afford a place to stay. Would an increase in the minimum wage, the $15 number has been kicked around in various places, would that go a long way in helping to alleviate this?
Absolutely. I certainly support a $15 minimum wage. I know Raise Up Washington right now has their initiative on the ballot for November for $12.50. I would be introducing legislation in January to push that up to $15 by 2020. Increasing the minimum wage would help pull tens of thousands of people out of poverty across Washington state. Single mothers with children, minority communities, the LGBT community, lower income people. Being able to increase that up to $15 an hour at full time, that would put somebody right around, after taxes, $900 on a 2-week paycheck. That would be exponentially better than we're looking at right now. Housing is something where they can explore options with increased income in order to be able to afford that. So yes, it's definitely going to help in getting lower income people into stable housing. It's going to help pull people out of poverty. People are going to be getting better health care, increasing the minimum wage. It's an increase that would definitely help in a lot of ways. It's definitely something we have to do.
There has been some concern among some businesses, particularly small business owners, who say that an increase of that size would force them to lay off people, so that there would actually be fewer jobs for people who were making the minimum wage or slightly over the current minimum wage. How do you respond to that?
Well, you have to look at the result of an increased minimum wage. People have more money, they spend more money. So those businesses in turn are going to be making more in terms of revenue that will go towards paying their employees. So it's a positive feedback cycle where these people are going to be able to pay them because they are making that increased money. One example, back in the prior to the Great Recession, there was an increase in the minimum wage from 75 cents an hour up to $1.50 an hour. So they doubled the minimum wage at that time, and they actually saw one of the greatest periods of economic growth in the country. So increasing the federal minimum wage double didn't see businesses closing down. It saw massive economic growth and gains. Doing so here in Washington, we would see similar results. Increasing the minimum wage is going to increase income for businesses, increase income for families. We're going to be looking at economic gains across the board.
$15 minimum wage?
If we can get it through the voters, I'm happy with that. I'm happy to settle for phasing it in and doing a lot of other things as well. Some of the businesses that are most concerned about this are businesses that are in a genuinely precarious position. I've been a restaurant owner, and I took restaurant management classes years ago and found out, to my astonishment, that 85% of all new restaurants fail the first year, and or 95 fail the first year, and 85 fail of what's left fail the second year.
But yours didn't, right?
I don't know what the statistics are today. I haven't looked at this in a long time. But I think that it's more important for those small businesses that are struggling to have a much higher cap on before they start paying B&O tax. And I'm hoping they'll come to the table with me and talk about a corporate income tax that's based on profits rather than gross receipts.
Let's move on to the environment and Initiative 732, which would pose a tax on carbon emissions. Do you favor 732?
I'm going to vote for it, and I struggled with this a little bit because the conversation around that in the legislature, there was a lot of pressure to do something about it during the session. And the private conversations were very, very interesting, where both sides were saying vastly different things, and nobody wanted to compromise. And so we ended up with what we've got, not, being fought against based on numbers that still nobody's sure are correct. But I think that some kind of movement towards taxing on carbon is going to be inevitable. Whether this one passes, I think it's going to be pretty popular. I think it's going to come close, even if it doesn't pass. I will vote for it, and we're going to be looking to get it right, because the initiative is a terrible way to make public policy, and legislative bodies always have to deal with those flaws in order to get it right. And getting it right, to me, means making sure you know what the numbers are and you don't cost the state too much money, and that it does what it is intended to do. And one of the battles that went on as this evolved was whether or not it has to be revenue neutral in order to pass, which means that it's a shift, which means there's winners and losers, or whether it needs to be a revenue producer that covers some of the costs of a carbon economy. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it.
So,
we'll be dealing with it.
Follow up on that, and then we'll get to
Yeah.
Kaitlyn. 732 would impose a tax on carbon emissions in exchange for reducing the sales tax. Now, the Office of Financial Management says that, in their opinion, it won't be revenue neutral, that it would cost the state several $1 million over a 6-year period. So you're saying the legislature would need to fix it to make it revenue neutral.
And it won't happen immediately
And
because
what-
we can't get the votes
So
to do
does
it
that
immediately.
mean if voters pass this, the legislature would then turn around and say, wait, we're increasing the sales tax, which you just voted
I don't
to
know what
reduce?
one doesn't know. One doesn't know. And there's credible sources that say that those numbers are wrong. That's why it was so confusing and why a lot of us hesitated. But the reality is that it's something that's before us right now, and we're going to have to deal with it sooner or later.
And does anybody really think, even if, to Greg's point, that, hey, we got to fix this thing and we'll fix it by increasing the sales tax, which might be blatantly onerous for even politicians, does anybody really believe that if a year or two passed, that the state isn't going to get that amount of money back from the sales tax by increasing it? You know
I
what
think
I'm
that the
saying.
sales tax has been raised as far as that can be on a statewide level. I think that King County has asked for lots of special dispensation to keep raising their sales tax for this and that. And I think that even King County is reaching the limit of what the voters can stomach. And there's been a lot more education about how regressive and volatile and and you've heard me say this before, we've got an aging population that is going to be buying fewer brand new bells and whistles, and a lot more food and medicine, which are not taxed. And and you talk about tax loopholes, the biggest one is for food and medicine, and we're not about to tax food and medicine. So we have a demographic impact on sales tax revenue that we have to pay attention to. And we have to pay attention to it in a serious way and look at other forms of revenue.
Kaitlyn, your thoughts on 732?
So the environment is an issue that is especially important to me because my generation is going to be the one that has to deal with the effects of what we're doing today. Ultimately, I will be voting for 732. I wish we had the option to create a carbon tax without reducing the sales tax, because I, again, don't want to see our state be losing millions of dollars a year. So I would definitely explore options to make it revenue neutral. Ultimately, though, it is something that we have to pass. Being able to counter the effects of pollution in our state is something that's extremely important, not just for people today, but it's going to be especially important for people in 10 years that we did something today in order to combat the ever-growing issue of global climate change. I want us to be at the forefront of that and be able to create a model for the rest of the nation on how we can move forward with improving our economy and improving our environment.
And now some would argue that Washington's already at the forefront of fighting climate change and carbon emissions. So critics would say this is just something that would harm businesses and not have any real impact. Do you think that's inaccurate?
Absolutely. Just because you're at the forefront of something doesn't mean you have to take a step back and let everybody else catch up to you. You should continue pressing forward with meaningful reform that the rest of the country can take a look at and say, this is what we need to do next. But ultimately, what we're looking at in terms of the carbon tax would be big businesses paying their fees on ultimately what they're doing in harm to the economy. So this isn't businesses that are a local restaurant going to be paying 50% of their profits because they happen to have some carbon thing. This is big businesses paying for the damage that they're doing to our local environment.
Now, I'm curious, Sharon is the incumbent and she's a Democrat and you're running as a Democrat. Where do you disagree with her on policy?
Well, one of the big reasons that I decided to file is because Sharon endorsed Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is a corrupt politician that has, over the years, been degrading to minorities. She's been degrading to black people, Hispanic people. Only recently did she announce support for gay marriage, only following suit of the president back in 2012. Ultimately, if this were the 90s, she would be a Republican. And the fact that our incumbent would go against her own district at a rate of 76% in the Democratic Party for Bernie Sanders is astonishing to me. And the fact that she would support a person that is so blatantly bad for our country, I question her judgment there, and I question if a person with that kind of judgment needs to be in the legislature.
Now, does that mean you're voting for Trump?
No, I'm voting for Jill Stein.
Okay. And Sharon, you supported and still support Hillary?
I do.
So then, Kaitlyn, initially you supported Bernie Sanders?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Well, and maybe you should answer the same question, but other than this particular one, what differentiates you from Kaitlyn?
I hardly know where to start. I think my understanding of the issues, one of the first things I did when I moved to Oregon was fight against Lon Maybaum, who was attacking gay people in the state of Oregon. I can remember marching and standing out in the rain and fighting.
But you're going to answer the question, what differentiates you from Kaitlyn?
Well, the length of time that I've been fighting for justice for all people. And frankly, I don't agree with Hillary on everything, and I wish that she had admitted her changes of mind and her mistakes earlier. But I admire her for all of the work that she's done that people are not talking about. I met her 20 years ago personally and got to know her just a little bit, just enough to not have any gut red flags that tell me she's a fraud. And a lot of people, frankly, have been saturated with the deliberate poison that's been put out by the Republican Party for a lot of years. And in the age of the internet, it's really hard to tell the difference between the truth and a lie. And I'm happy to stand on my own record of being part of the coalition that pushed back against some horrible legislation that wanted to come over that they were trying to get over from the Senate related to transgender bathroom usage, which was a horrible. My proudest moment as a legislator was voting for marriage equality, and I'm happy to support somebody who who may not be the most inspiring speaker in a big crowd, but knows how to get things done, and who has shown what her true values are in fighting for women and children's rights all over the world. I'm proud to be
But
in support of her.
generally speaking, you probably both agree that you're probably similar on many of the issues that.
I think our
Fine.
underlying values are
Similar.
strongly progressive.
Yeah,
I'm a little more progressive than Sharon. I'm a little more aggressive than Sharon.
progressive, okay, progressive and.
And aggressive.
Okay. I have a,
She doesn't know me very well.
I do have a quick political question. Obviously, you're running in the 49th, and you're both Democrats, and on the other side of the 49th, there are also two Democrats. Sharon, are you supporting either Monica Stoney or Alicia Topper?
Yes,
Which one?
I'm supporting Alicia.
And why?
Because of the diversity of her interests and base, the work that she's done in the community and in the district, and because I saw her several years ago as a rising star and promised her that whenever she was ready to move forward on anything, I would be there to help her as much as I could. I keep promises.
Okay.
I am supporting both. I feel.
Hold on. That's not a good answer.
Well-
For obvious reasons,
Mhm.
because people aren't going to be able to vote for both, and so this is sort of like a who you support question. Who would you mark? Where's
I'll
the
be
ballot
voting
mark?
for Monica
Okay, you want to say why?
because she has brought the different issues that she's been tackling. Alicia's been a very vocal person on two issues, housing and homelessness, where Monica has really tackled and been vocal about the rest. And I can appreciate Alicia caring so much about housing, but we need people that are passionate about more than just one issue and will campaign on more than just one issue and speak to more than just one issue. As the legislature is not a one-issue chamber, it's going to be a very tough session, and we need people that have experience in many different areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move on then. Give us your final pitch why voters should support you, and please mention any notable endorsements. I'll start with Kaitlyn.
So I have been endorsed by the Democratic elector for the 3rd Congressional District. Outside of that, people will endorse those who have voted for them before. So unfortunately, against Sharon, I don't have many endorsements. But ultimately, the voters should pick me as their best choice because, again, I have personally lived through the many issues that are facing the 49th Legislative District, ranging from housing to education to homelessness. I care very passionately about the environment, the LGBT community, and I'm willing to have those conversations about what needs to be done in order to move forward with Washington State, but I'm also not willing to start in the middle. If you ask for half a loaf of bread, you only get crumbs. If you ask for the full loaf, you're gonna get half a loaf. So I am willing to be more aggressive and progressive in where I start in the legislature. If that means compromising and moving a little more centrist, I'm willing to do that, but I'm not willing to start in the center and be a moderate. I will continue to be a truly progressive voice for everybody in the 49th and in Washington State.
All right, thank you. Sharon?
I'll start with the endorsements. I was going to bring the list, but it is the standard list plus for.
Which ones are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of the Young Democrats of Clark County and the Young Democrats of Washington State. I believe that we need to bring more people into the process. I'm not ready to hang up my tennis shoes just yet, but I believe that we do need, when I first moved moved back to Washington from Oregon over 10 years ago now, I went to a Democratic meeting and I was the youngest person in the room. And we've got a very, very active group of young, active Democrats, and we don't always agree with each other, but they are there, and I think they're there for the long term. So I'm proud of those endorsements. I'm proud of my labor endorsements because those are voted upon by the membership endorsements that represent working people. I'm proud of the businesses and the public employees like the police and the sheriffs that have endorsed me. And I'm proud that the Restaurant Association and the Realtors and the Rental Association have endorsed me, even though I don't carry any of their water all of the time. I'm proud that they feel that they can come and talk to me and that my door is always open. And there are, you have a majority of people that go one way or another, but a legislator has to, can't govern like this, saying which way is the wind blowing. Some of the things that you vote for reflect your core values, and you have to know who you are. And you say, okay, this is who I am, and I've shared that with everybody. They know who I am. This shouldn't be a surprise, even if they don't like it, even if they disagree with it. And you have to defend that. You have to take your lumps for it. Sometimes there'll be an issue where your people want it. The loudest voices in your district want it, and it doesn't have unintended consequences. It doesn't hurt anything, and you do it for them. And sometimes you band together with people from all over the state, and you say, this is important to the future of our state. We don't want people's homes to be burned up in eastern Washington. We don't want our farms to not have enough water. So those of us on the west side have to invest in those reservoirs. We have to invest in that fire suppression, and we have to come up with some solutions. So you have to be true to yourself, but you also have to look out for what people want, what's good for the state, and you have to, of all times, come back and explain yourself.
Great, thank you. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.